On this episode of the Neutral Wisdom Podcast, Satanist and Satanic Warlock Robert Shirley discusses advice and guidance and is joined by author and Church of Satan, Reverend Dr. Robert Ing, author of Lessons for Boys and Fatherless Men. You are listening to the Neutral Wisdom Podcast, a podcast dedicated to passing on knowledge and experience from a satanic perspective, hosted by Satanist and Satanic Warlock Robert Shirley.
Greetings and welcome to the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Satanist and Satanic Warlock Robert Shirley, and today we're going to be discussing advice and guidance, how we get it and how we give it. I'll be joined later by renowned author and Church of Satan Reverend Dr. Robert Ing to discuss his latest book, Lessons for Boys and Fatherless Men. It's going to be a great conversation. So this is a weird one for a Satanism podcast, isn't it? That doesn't really escape me either. Our studies in Satanism tell us we should not give opinions or advice unless we are asked. Satanic Rule, the Earth number 1. So why do we feel compelled to keep chiming in with our own opinions or advice? Like, especially me. Aren't my blogs, books, and podcasts all just thinly veiled advice? Isn't this antithetical to Satanism? Well, I suppose it's all in how you take it, which ultimately is not my responsibility. I mean, you can take it as advice if you want. Likewise, you can take it as my opinion, especially if you don't agree with me. The reason I do what I do is that at my age, I'm over the top of the hill and picking up speed on the other side. When you get to a point when you realize that in the course of the average lifespan, you have less time left to live than you've already lived, you're going to go through the proverbial midlife crisis. What have I done with my life? Even more, what am I going to do with the rest of it? I figure that if I've gone through certain situations and or have experienced certain issues, then others have, or will experience these things too. It's not like life comes with a manual. We do rely on the experiences and wisdom of others to help us out. Hell, I wish I knew then what I know now. But even that's a double-edged sword because I wouldn't have had such great learning opportunities. But hey, I wish I had had me to give this type of advice and guidance. But wait a second. Dr. Ing's fantastic book, Lessons for Boys and Fatherless Men, is full of great advice and guidance. It's based on common sense and basic social behavior that I see is sorely needed in society today. And I love the tone of his book. It's very positive. Follow what it says and you'll be a more effective and contributing member of society. Not necessarily the herd, but society. Cynic that I am, though, while Dr. Ing's approach is to tell you what you should do, I'm always more of the ilk who will tell you what not to do, pretty much since I've already done it and paid the consequences. As a professional teacher, this is largely what I base my lessons on. Theory, in and of itself, is fine and dandy. But theory only ever demonstrates how things should go. It rarely, if ever, talks about what to do if shit goes sideways. And that's where I come in. The essay for today's podcast is based on lessons I learned growing up, where I discovered what not to do. Some of these lessons I learned right away as the victim of circumstance. Others I learned later in life as I matured. Even more so, others I learned when I became a Satanist and began to live my life for me. You don't have to take my work as advice or even guidance. Hell, my life has been so entertaining, in a sick and twisted, demoralizing sort of way, that you could just grab some snacks and enjoy it as pure entertainment. Maybe I'll publish an audiobook or start creating videos. Hey, yeah, let me write that down. In any case, take the following essay however you want. This one is called Lessons for Fatherless Boys and Men, or How I Learned What Not to Do in Life. As a writer, and now an author, I draw a lot of inspiration from my own real-life situations as well as others around me. I also take the time to read other COS members' books and essays, as our creative community certainly has a lot to offer. One such book I recently completed was Dr. Robert Ing's Lessons for Fatherless Boys and Men. This was a great book, offering interesting perspectives and advice in a pure common sense approach. This is advice which not enough people receive, but many sorely need. Dr. Ing provides recommendations and suggestions he's received from his family and in turn given his own son. He incorporates different philosophies into everyday common sense in an easy-to-read, easy-to-understand format which will resonate with everyone. Yes, you might recognize this as the review I left on Amazon about his book, but I am allowed to plagiarize myself. Dr. Ing speaks candidly on a variety of topics, everything from how long you can wear an article of clothing before you really have to wash it, to what to carry in your wallet. He talks about social relationships, interactions, and responsibilities. He stresses self-love and being your own best friend. All advice that most of us learn with experience. Imagine if someone had been there to offer this advice to us when we needed it. Dr. Ing's lessons really led me to a little bit of self-introspection and got me thinking about my own upbringing and lack of fatherly advice which I experienced. It was this lack of advice which has pretty much brought me to where I am today. Was this because I lacked a father? Well, that depends on how you look at it. I did have prominent male figures in my life, a biological father as well as a stepfather of sorts, that being my mother's partner after my parents' divorce. I also had an uncle related by marriage who was around more often than not. But did I have a father figure who dispensed the type of advice found in Dr. Ing's book, a guiding hand to make sure I stayed on the right paths and learned all the basic life lessons which a young man, and everyone for that matter, should know? Nope. My experiences were quite the opposite, actually. From these men in my life, I learned what not to do, how not to act, how not to treat others. I learned what I did not want to be. The problem is, it took me a long while to realize that these were the lessons I took away from each man. When we're immersed in any situation, it's our normal. That is, we're accustomed to the way things are and don't realize that they could be different. Sure, we see many versions of different in media. TV, movies, and now social media all show us what other people are doing, how they are living. But that's them and this is us, correct? Our life isn't a Hallmark movie, no matter how badly we wish it were so. So, while Dr. Ing's book is full of great advice on what to do, and you really should read it, I am going to share what I learned not to do. For example, I learned how not to treat women or romantic partners. You'd think that this would be plain old common sense, and it would for most people. But as I stated earlier, when your normal is what it is, you really don't have the ability to see anything wrong with it. I used to be an absolutely terrible person in relationships. I learned this from dear old Dad. He never literally taught any of this formally. I think I simply picked it up by osmosis. Education by proximity, I suppose. My way or the highway. You do what I say when I say. I'm in charge. I'm the boss. And all of the controlling, verbal abuse, and bullying that came with it. I should note here that I have never been physical with any of my former partners. That I knew was wrong. I remember the light bulb moment I had when I realized this was not normal. I don't want to go into it here, but suffice to say that it forced me to look at the patterns of behavior displayed by all of the men in my life. When I saw that I had been acting exactly the way my father did, it was a pretty terrible moment for me. Changing that behavior was a struggle. Imagine trying to change your programming. But I do consider myself successful in that Ms. Wiz is still with me after 25 years. I learned that one does not demand respect. Honor thy father and thy mother. So the Christian Bible tells us this. Why? I have no idea. The problem is, my baby boomer male influences figured that this was owed to them and that they were entitled to it. I mean, what an incredible get-out-of-jail-free card. This means I can treat my kids like absolute garbage, but at the end of the day, they will respect me because I'm their parent, or I'll beat their asses. Seriously, fuck off. As the target of such ridiculous rhetoric growing up, I learned that if you demand respect, you're not going to get it. You must earn respect. Respect does not come from fear or intimidation. You earn respect through your words and your actions. The concept of respect has been a bit warped over time, mostly thanks to different cultures such as the motorcycle clubs. An actual statement I have overheard. Bro, you don't disrespect a bro. Whatever that means. As Satanists, we don't live by the golden rule of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Rather, we do unto others as they do unto us. Sounds an awful lot like the give respect to get respect adage to me. I learned that tough love cannot be used as an excuse because you don't care. I never received any guidance or encouragement from my family when I was growing up. I was pretty much a regular teenager, but was picking up a lot of negative lessons from my adult influences during my adolescence. When my parents, mom and boyfriend, saw the results of their negative lessons, they didn't take the blame for them. They kicked me out at age 18 and called it tough love. I knew nothing about living on my own. I knew nothing about handle money. I was never taught about paying bills or being responsible for rent. But out I had to go with nowhere to go and no prospects. It was far easier for these two self-centered individuals to simply remove the problem from their midst and never give it a passing thought. It didn't matter where I went or what I did as long as I wasn't there. And what was I supposed to do? Oh, that was an easy solution. Get a job and get an apartment. Yeah, no problem. Just let me do that while I'm packing my stuff. I would never subject my own child to this. In fact, we've gone out of our way to make sure she has had every opportunity to succeed. Our version of tough love is doing neat things like cutting off her internet when she doesn't pay her bill. And believe me, we are just the worst parents in the entire world when we do this. We just don't understand. Our job as parents is to care for our kids and make sure they don't have to go through the same types of hardships we did. And above all, make sure they succeed. Am I succeeding at that? Well, sometimes, but every day is another opportunity to learn, so it's still a work in progress. I learned that name calling does not equal harmless fun. I've mentioned numerous times in my writing that my nickname at home growing up was Ugly. Thanks, Mom. But what I haven't mentioned is that this wasn't the only nickname I had around my house. Now, don't get me wrong. Giving someone a nickname out of affection or as a good-natured jibe is all in good fun. For example, every motorcycle club has a dude named Kickstand who forgot to put his kickstand down and fell over when he parked his bike. Shit happens. But an insulting nickname just comes down to bullying. Combine this with the aforementioned demanding respect thing, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do about it. Further to this, to me, the ultimate insult is calling someone Guy. This just tells me that you're not important enough for me to learn your name. So imagine how great it was when my mom's boyfriend actually started calling me Guy. It got so bad that I actually told him I loathed the nickname Sport. Really, I could care less about being called that. But guess what? I was Sport thereafter. But hey, at least he stopped calling me Guy. So if I playfully give someone a nickname they don't like, I'll back off as opposed to continuing its use, because I know how that feels. I learned that keeping up with the Joneses is pointless. Envy and greed aren't sins, despite what conventional religion tells you. Greed and envy are motivators. These feelings make you want to achieve more, to gain more. At least that's what they do for me. Whatever these motivate you for, as long as you're doing your level best to achieve and are proud of your accomplishments, nobody should exclude you or mock you for it. Except in my family. So the uncle I mentioned before and his family had been going out to their trailer at a local lake for many years. After a time, they sold this trailer and built a cabin in a fairly exclusive area. As the trailer community was close, their lake friends did the same thing and built a couple of lots down from them. It just so happened that my uncle came into a lot of money by inheritance and so paid off his property. He started buying all the toys, boats, snowmobiles, ATVs, you name it. The neighbor, on the other hand, was not as fortunate and did the best he could to keep up with my uncle. Understandably, this guy was not buying a new snowmobile every year and was fixing his own outboard motor when it broke down, things like that. Not long after the toys started coming in, I watched my uncle start to exclude his buddy from activities. Oh, you can't come with us on this trail ride, Bill. Your snow machine sucks and you can't keep up. Now, that's a real dick move in my opinion. So the lesson here is that your friends are only your friends if they can keep up with your spending. Not for me. I don't care how much a person makes, or for that matter, what they do for a living. I don't care what they have or what they don't. If I can share with you, I will. People are more than the money they make and the toys they have. I suppose I'm ranting and have gone on for a bit too long. There are so many more instances of things I have learned not to do in this life. Hey, maybe I should write a book. Just kidding, Dr. Ing. The point is, you will have your influences and lessons come to you at all points in your life. You can either accept those for what they are or apply your own set of filters to them to pull out what is most appropriate to you. If you choose to accept them for what they are, be prepared to seek out people with the same types of morals and ethics as yourself. This isn't a bad thing at all. In fact, your life will be much more pleasant if you're among a similar crowd. When I was accepting that this is just the way life is, or this is just the way I am, I was surrounded by similar people, and at that time I had no issues with it because it was my normal. Once I applied my own filters to everything, these filters coming from years of experience and knowledge, and especially applied the filter of Satanism to my own life, I saw that things could be different. Even better, I'm now able to go back and deal with past issues of normalcy I unknowingly had. I suppose this all relates back to Dr. Ing's knowing yourself philosophy. The better your filters, the more you'll get to know yourself and be able to make changes towards the best version of you. Maybe after hearing this, it might be a good exercise to do a little self-reflecting. Think about your upbringing, your normal. Has it influenced the way you behave today? Do you see anything today you could do differently against your normal? All I can say is, it worked for me. And even better, I know not to tell you that it'll work for you. You get to go figure that out for yourself. Let's pause here. When we come back, we're joined by Dr. Robert Ing for further discussion. Stay tuned.
You are listening to the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. For comments, questions or suggestions, email us at information@neutralwisdom.ca.
Rabbit Crow Arts and Graphics brings you art, items, and apparel with a nasty bite. Specializing in presenting imagery of a dark and historical flavor, Rabbit Crow modifies this dark aesthetic imagery for modern eyes in a wide range of formats, from stretched canvas paintings to t-shirts and coffee mugs. Art expressly for the elite segment of humanity with whom dark art resonates. Visit us today at rabbitcrow.com.
And welcome back to the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. I am very excited to welcome our guest for today with quite possibly the longest introduction ever in the history of this show. Dr. Robert Ing, with a whole string of accreditation letters after his name. Don't get a job at 7-Eleven, Dr. Ing. The name tag will probably give you a bad back. Dr. Ing is a Canadian forensic scientist, mentalist, author, adventurer, and video presenter. As a mentalist, he performs interactive mind reading and paranormal demonstrations on stage for live audiences. He's best known as a mentalist for his theatrical performances of Nail Gun Roulette and a 19th century inspired bullet catch. In other words, don't screw with Dr. Ing, like ever. He's a fellow of the Academy of Police Sciences and a fellow of the Institute of Meridian Psychotherapy. A respected and multidisciplined professional, he has been the recipient of many awards such as the Kaufman Humanitarian Award, Emergency Services Medal, the Norris R. Brown Memorial Award, the Warriors Medal, the Venerable Order of the Knights of Michael the Archangel, and the Sovereign's Medal, to name a couple. Dr. Robert Ing has held 3 adjunct professorships and 6 honorary degrees, and for some reason he has agreed to add Neutral Wisdom Podcast guests to this list of high accolades. Welcome, Dr. Ing. I am so glad to award you this most highest of honors.
I appreciate that. It's a pleasure being here. How do I follow up all that? I almost, it's amazing that you memorized that. I thought you were going to read it, but anyway, that's fantastic.
So, for those of our listeners who are not familiar with you, I would love if you would start by telling us just a little bit about yourself. Don't go through your entire CV, or we're going to be here till tomorrow afternoon. But who are you? What's your background? How did you become a Satanist? Things like that. Really curious to hear
Why
this.
am I here, in other words?
Yeah, who are you?
Okay, well, I was actually born in Toronto, and let's see, I come from a very firm orange Irish household. My grandparents raised me primarily coming from a dysfunctional family, and not that I'm advertising that, but yeah. Some people might think that, from what you've read of me, that I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, but to the contrary, I think we probably had brass ones, and maybe they were plated, but it was a good middle class, maybe upper middle class, so I'd be pushing it, working family, blue collar family. And then my mom is Irish, my father is Chinese, but I was more raised with, I guess, the Irish English background. So my religious upbringing, therefore, was primarily Protestant, with my father's influence. My father divorced my mother eventually, or I don't know who divorced who, but I was pretty young when it happened. But I did have a Confucian Buddhist influence as well in there, so that sort of tempered the other side of it. So it's just kind of odd. Oh, I did go to boarding school in England for 3 years. That was sort of like Hogwarts in reality for me, with the big Gothic architecture and everything else. That was fun. It was certainly had it so that I would be comfortable wearing a tie or an ambition string, as we used to call them. From there, basically, some people say, "Well, when did you lose your faith or lose your religion?" I didn't really lose it. I sort of found it for me. So about 1984, and there's nothing magical about 1984. It just really did happen in 1984. I began reading the works of Anton LaVey, and from there, a lot of things that he wrote about resonated with me. Now, let me just throw back a little bit to my grandparents' Irish upbringing. If you're any follower of the occult or paganism, everybody knows that the Celts were really into this thing, prior to St. Patrick driving the snakes out of Ireland. So my grandmother was sort of into sort of that era, even though we were, as I said, a very strong Orange Irish household, Protestant household. So I had sort of had that inkling towards that side. I knew a lot about the Celtic side of paganism. So that's how I sort of was more open to reading other things, including the works of Dr. LaVey, because, of course, he did have occult classes in San Francisco originally. I don't know, I want to say weekend classes, but I don't know where I got that from. But so it resonated with me, and I would say I took up the mantle, literally, or the horns, in 1984, literally. I said, this is for me. Now, prior to that, being the adventurer and going and doing all sorts of things around the world and seeing how different people live and not in the tourist spots under different assignments and things, I had seen children starving. I had seen bodies piled up in places, which I tend not to give too much detail. I wrote a book about it. Anyway, it's there. It's historic. I don't know if it's still in print, but it's still there. And as a result, I questioned, how could certain people's concepts of their religion, or their deity, say, allow this to happen. And this really sort of had me questioning my faith. Now, I go into that actually in the Afternoon with Me book, where I lost that, which is out Amazon, plug, not really, but
I find that really interesting that you were questioning providence, but from the human side, not from the deity side. How could a god allow bad things to happen to good people? And you came at it from the angle of, how can you people let this happen to each other?
yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
I guess I looked at it and said, why the hell would you drink the Kool-Aid? You're numbing the pain, but you're not solving the problem. You're saying, oh no, but there's a better life on the layaway plan. What is that? That's the way I look at it, right? If I'm promising something to you in the near future, how the heck is that going to help you today? Even professionals ask for a retainer before they start the work. So I want a bit of a retainer here, right? But anyway, I just blasphemed. Now I'm going to jail or whatever. But
You and me both, and the rest of us who are listening, so
there,
not a problem.
there you go.
Rent a bus and go together.
That's right. And go fast. Take the highway to HE double hockey sticks. That's the Canadian way of saying it. So that's basically it. But I lost my faith way before I actually read the works of LaVey. But 1984, did this. From there on in, I sort of leaned more towards that. But I did not become an official member of the organization until I think so 2005, 2006. Yeah, so I haven't been there that long, really. I never really, I think from about 1984, maybe late 1980s, I never kept what I believed under a bushel basket. In other words, people knew where I stood, but it's not like I would go be an evangelist for it, or I try to convert people, because that's not what we do. That's not what I do. What I would do is, so if someone's trying to tell me things or trying to push ideas at me, I'd say, look, I respect what you do and you have the right to do whatever you want, but let me put it this way. I'm not a Christian, or I'm not a Jew. I'm not this. Somebody actually thought I was Jewish, because the star, but it's weird. But I said, no, I'm not this, right? And they sort of shook their heads at me and thought I was crazy. Professionally, I have been challenged when I've had to take oaths on the Christian Bible, the Holy Bible. And once again, I don't despise it. I'm not going to burn them. I'm not going to do crazy things with them. I respect it. I've even written in almost my books that, if this works for you, if you have seen someone pick themselves up, whether it's from alcoholism or drug abuse or getting away from suicide because of this particular faith, that's great. I'm not going to go and rain on their thing. That's them. Religion, or what one person believes, even philosophically, is a very personal experience. And that is between you and what you've read or what you've accepted. It's got nothing to do with everybody else. Now, I know there are religions out there and philosophy say you got to go and convert people because that's what you're supposed to do. No, this is not MLM, multi-level marketing. This is not network marketing. This is a personal experience, and my experience is going to be different from your experience and vice versa. So for me, this works. The live and let live thing, it doesn't bother, but don't put it in my face. And I always say the same thing goes with sexuality or anything else, keep it. They're personal experiences. I don't want to share in it. It's your thing, and I respect that. And this is what living in a free and democratic or semi-democratic country is all about. That's what people died and fought for centuries. So let's respect that. So anyway, so in 2006, I became a member. Yeah, that's sort of me in as much of a nutshell as I could put it in.
Well, with all of the accolades that you've received and the awards and the recognition and that name tag that's like 8 feet long, you were a believer or a follower of the philosophy, the religion, for a period of about 20 years before you officially joined the organization. Did you find that the words of Anton LaVey or the things in the Satanic Bible really helped you focus on the things that you were accomplishing?
Here's the thing. Some religions, and I don't want to name names, I have a doctorate of literature, and it's religious literature, but we won't go there. But I've read a lot of some people. Oh, this guy's talking out of his rear end because he hasn't read the books. I know how many people can say this. I have actually read the King James Version and the New International Version of the Holy Bible cover to cover. You ask a lot of Christians or people that adhere to or believe this book if they've read it cover to cover, and 70% of them will lie. I have also read the Quran. I have also read the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I have also read the Gita. From an academic standpoint, not trying to be judgmental, not trying to pull anything apart. But I came to a realization that, yes, there are people that need these books. They need this faith. I'm not saying begrudging it. I'm not going to go out and burn anybody's book. And it's not because of the consequences with some organizations, okay? It's a book. I'm sorry, but, there aren't light waves that come out of it. There's no power in that. The power is what you give it when you read it. The power is the emotionalism within you, what it pulls out of you. So this is very important concept. So I'm not there to sacrilege to anyone's book. But nonetheless, I found that these books all basically try to put people in nice little cubby holes and saying, you're born of sin or you're born imperfect, you can't do this, you can't do that. That's where, on the other side of the coin, you are not limited. It's not saying you cannot do this, you cannot do that. Do whatever the hell you want. I mean, within reason, that's legal, that's proper, that's respectful. I've written this as well. Freedom is not infinite. With freedom comes responsibility. And that responsibility includes not exercising that freedom so it overshadows someone else's freedom or it impinges on their freedom. But anyway, so that's basically it. So yeah, I found that, it empowered me in that I wasn't held to certain restraints that the old religions had. And, there's nothing wrong with old religions, just like there's nothing wrong with history. You learn from these things. So if anything, studying religious literature helped me understand the world, understand people better. Actually, dare I say that sort of spurred me on to want to study psychology, which I use a lot. If you've read my material, the way I present it, or the way that I frame things, or how I, so yeah. And, and also coming from, once again, a Confucian Buddhist background, I've also read a lot of the Buddhist religious texts and things as well. So I've got a bit of everything. And I've also read other things from paganism, different witches' Bibles and things and all sorts of materials.
So you read a lot and you write as well. So
yes.
Just to clarify for our folks who are listening, I had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Ng for about a half hour before we actually started recording. And this man's brain goes a million miles an hour in every direction. And yes, psychology wise, I feel like I should be lying on the couch and talking to you sometimes. But you also write. So you've got the
Yes.
scientific side, but you also have the creative side. I don't know how you have time for any of this stuff, but you've written a number of books. So how did you get started in writing books? How many books have you written? And what kind of stuff do you write about?
Well, okay, to start off, a lot of my books aren't necessarily psychological or soft sciences. And please, people that are into psychology and stuff, don't think that's a dig me. I actually, with my better half, she's like soft sciences, and she gets all upset when I call them soft sciences as opposed to hard sciences. A few of my degrees are in engineering, electrical engineering, and I've actually worked on R&D teams to develop antenna systems and satellite systems and things in my past projects. So that's another thing. But I've been writing since, I guess, the early 80s, mid 80s. I've written easily probably over hundreds of books. I don't know how many. I did a lot of occult kind of books for a while. But then the engineering side of me came out. I'd written a book called The Canadian Military Radio Frequency Guide, which dealt with radio frequency or radio communication systems in the Canadian military. I've written a book called Tactical Signals Intelligence, which deals with basically tapping into radio waves and stuff for law enforcement, like stuff. So there's technical stuff. I've also written a book on interferometric devices, which is radio telescopes. And in there, actually, I designed, I put in the public domain a design for a filtering system so that you could actually pick up signals from distant planets. Now, I'm not talking about aliens here. I'm talking about natural radio waves, right? Because this was considered useful by some people, I won't say everybody, useful by some people in helping clarify, making, you might say, RF signatures of things across the known galaxy or world, whatever. I got a little bit of an award for that. I think that's gone to Goodwill or Sally Ann years ago.
It's at the bottom of the pile somewhere, I'm sure.
I'm going to tell you something about all these things, and people talk about all this, especially, I guess, in the last 10 years. I don't put doctor or my titles on much anymore. I remember a lot of times I say, don't call me doctor, this is my Robert. Because there was a thing that I was watching, and I could really relate to this, and it was and I always get this mixed up. The fighter who bit the guy's ear off.
Tyson bit off Holyfield's ear.
I think it was Tyson. It might have been the other guy, but I think it was Tyson. And they came in to interview him. It was a documentary. And he had all these belts. And he just had them sitting around, like, not just really properly displayed. And the guy said, oh, you got all these belts. He says, these are garbage. So I'm getting rid of them. He says, that's what was. So what I'm doing now. And I could relate to that. And the same thing with the titles. The titles are good. I always make a joke about this, but quite serious. If I want a good airline reservation or I want a good table at a restaurant, yeah, okay, that's good. There are people that are impressed by these things, but you know what? Let this sink in for a minute. There are a lot of doctors out there. There are a lot of people that are, dare I say, members of the Order of Canada. Ooh. And you know what they're doing? They're driving bloody taxis, Uber. They're delivering your pizza. It's not what you got. I mean, it proves that you had the stamina to study something and you kept on and you've got the diligence to do this. But in no way is saying where you're at today, right? It's what you do with it. And there's a lot of people, they rest on their laurels and then they fall asleep on their laurels and they don't go nowhere. They're the guy that say, I wonder whatever happened to ... And unless the rest of it's saying that he or she died, this person's wasted the rest of their life.
All of the thrill was in the hunt. And now once they've gotten it, they slack off. Okay, well, I accomplished that and I don't need to do anything else, sort of thing.
You know what the secret is, though? I'll tell you a secret. You just revealed it. The secret in life is not the destination. The thrill is in the hunt. Continually be a hunter. Don't stop. When I put in my thing adventurer, I've done the Arctic Circler, and I'll go up to Churchill and chase aurora, and Northern Lights and stuff like that. When I was younger, I was probably, much to my wife at that time's upset, young me decided I'm going to go bungee jumping when it first came out. I've done parachuting, I've done hang gliding, I've done all this, and outside of the military, not within the military. this is living on the edge. This is all this good stuff, right? And you don't have to be rich to do it. I mean, there's all sorts of ways you can work it, but the bottom line is it's the chase, it's the journey, it's not the destination. So all these titles and everything else, yeah, they're nice and everything else. And as I said, you will find that some of the books I don't have that. But if I'm writing something that's academic or that I feel that someone's going to point fake facts, fake news, fake this, listen, dude, it's not a PhD piled higher and deeper like you might have with your keyboard in your mom's basement. Dude, I actually paid my dues. So that's the difference. So the whole thing is I'm saying, look, this is me. Not that I'm saying that I'm better than you or not, but I'm saying this is just telling you I know how to do research. Like I wrote a book about robots. Well, I wrote 2 books about robots. The other one's coming out in another few weeks. But yeah, the book about robots, I actually put some of the degrees in there, but it's like something like got 100 different reference sources listed in the back. At least give me some credit and just look at it before you discount it. The new book coming out is called Robot Army, and it's about the militarization of robot soldiers. Well, robot soldiers in the military, and the cost efficiency is, are they better than humans in decision making and ethics and costs? And I look at various armies, look at Canada, the US, the UK, and the EU, and Russia and China in those contexts.
So a lot of the books that you've written are scientific and they're analytical and they're factual and information based. But you've also written books that give advice. And that brings us to
Yes.
Lessons for Fatherless Boys and Men, which I told you earlier actually had a really profound effect on me. Your tone is really great because it's very positive. So I take something like that where I did not have the benefit of having you to tell me these things as I was growing up, and I learned all the things not to do. But, when I started my own writing and my own journey on this, I wanted to share my experiences, much like you have, and I wanted to share how Satanism helped me. Did you see a need for common sense guidance like you wrote in your books, Lessons for Fatherless Boys and Men and An Afternoon with Me?
I see it every day that there's a need for this. We call it common sense. And if you're over a certain age, you will call it common sense. But to be honest with you, we are in uncommon times and there's no common sense anymore. Nothing makes sense. If we look at even world governments, and I'm not pointing at any one particular government, but if we look at world governments, they do things that are nonsensical. We look at corporations, they do things that are nonsensical. We live in the age of non-common sense. And all of a sudden to come out with common sense is, my goodness, I didn't know that, or I didn't. So you have to re-educate people. But the reason we have non-common sense, I think, is the way I feel, is that, first of all, over the past couple decades, or more than a couple actually, whatever reason, I can go into it, but I don't want to take up too much time on it, but we have children having children. We have child mothers, child fathers. Or a lot of times we just have child mothers raising their youngins on their own. When you have a child raising a child, this child has not had the benefit of being told their background, their ancestry, who they were, where they came from. Because by osmosis or organically, a person will automatically go to a certain code. They will develop their own moral code. They will develop their own ethics. They will develop because they know who they are, but they don't have that. And we're also to the point in society, economically, financially, if you will, where if you are fortunate to have a mother and father in the family, they both have to work, put food on the table to be sure that everybody is taken care of. They both have to work. That means the child is then left with at school and then goes to aftercare or daycare. Maybe the child ends up being babysat by strangers outside of that. So therefore, this child, during the formative years, they're being educated and taught, and their role models are being formed by complete strangers that you don't know who they are, don't know where they come from, don't know what their moral compass is. I was fortunate in that with my children, because of my own work situation and everything else, I was able to, I just load them. Once again, had this big car. I loaded them in the back of the car and I took them. And, there's stories where I was at business meetings and my young boy, when he was like 3 or 4 years old, he had this penchant for throwing up on people. Many a times when he got me out of some meetings. But, the reality is that, so I have been the Mr. Mom at one point as well. So I know what it's like. So yeah, there is people don't have common sense. So that's out the window. But then people say, oh, it's these kids these days. What's wrong with these kids these days? Well, I'll tell you what's wrong with the kids these days. Why are they lazy? Why don't they know what it is? Because they've seen the shit show that we've made of society. And I say collectively. The shit show is that they know that when we were growing up at our age, and I'm talking about older people, you went and worked for a company and you'd stay there for 25, 40 years. There's 40, 45-year people in the military and you get the little medals and all this. But the whole thing is that they stayed with the firm. My grandfather from Ireland came over. He used to be a cabinet maker in Ireland. And then during the war, he ended up making caskets between that and serving in the military. And then when he came over here, he ended up working for a company called Consumers Gas, which is now known as Enbridge in a lot of places. And he spent 25 years of his life there. And he got the gold watch, and he also got a nice FB Rogers tea service, silver, worth a few bob there. And it was great. It's great. And he got his pension, and that was great. But these kids, and they could buy a house. You could afford to buy a house in those days, But now the $13,000 bungalow that he could have bought back then is now easily over $1 million in Toronto, probably even more in out west. But the whole thing is, the kids see this. They say, well, I can't afford a rent. Trying to get a job is ridiculous, and it's all minimum wage. And I don't know how long I'm going to be there for, because people are going to be laid off and all this other stuff. And people don't, and geez, all you're going to pay me is minimum wage. What's motivating these kids? And these kids go through an education system that doesn't teach them. It doesn't even teach them how to be workers anymore. We used to, when we think back, it taught us, there was certain discipline there. I went to private boarding school in England for 3 years, but it taught the people, by the way, the people I was in with private boarding school, most of them were learning how to be manservants or butlers, or they were actually from very well-to-do families. That means that, I knew how to use a knife and fork properly and how to set a table. But nonetheless, they don't have that educational system. The system that they've gone through doesn't even teach them to be good employees anymore. It teaches them just, we got to do this, we got to do this. I was appalled when I found out that my young son, I mentioned to the teacher, I said, so how's he doing in spelling? And said, spelling? We don't teach spelling anymore. That's craziness. The joke is, right, if you want to mystify a new graduate, start writing in cursive. Don't think you're a doctor, but they won't read it. So it doesn't prepare them. So we have an education system to prepare them, and our economy is a crap. So you're going to blame them for this? Why should they waste their time? I'm not saying illegitimate, but this is the situation. Mom and dad can't do anything about it because they have to work and put food on the table. So anyway, I saw all these people, boys in particular, but I say the same thing with the girls, but the boys not having the benefit of a father. Now, I'm not going to say teach them how to change a tire, or because that they can get off YouTube. Thank goodness. But I do that myself. But on the other hand, the book Lessons for Fatherless Boys and Men was written for fatherless boys and fatherless men who need to be able to learn how to put certain things together, I guess, mentally, in an awareness way, in a philosophical way. A lot of men and boys you go up to, whether they had a father or not, you ask them, you say, so what is your code? What is your code? Like what code? Well, what more, your moral compass, what would that be? They just look at their shoes. They have no idea what we're talking about. I guess in one way, I felt that there was a need for it. I see a lot of people out there just wandering around. I see a lot of books that tell people how to start things. This is scary. You go into a bookstore, and on one side is the books on how to start a business, and the other side is all self-help. And you say, there's something wrong with society here. Because what about the stuff in between? If you could go from starting the business to learning how to maintain it, which is the stuff which should be in between, you wouldn't need the other one at the end, self-help. It's a funny thing, but it's not just in Canada, US, or Western world. It's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Further to what you're talking about and the fact that people need this, and I agree with you, I think that they do. Two questions that come around from that for me. And the first question is, do you think that this lack of common sense in society today, do you think that's kind of what contributes to making yourself and myself and a lot of other people that we know a little more misanthropic than the average person?
Definitely.
It contributes to it, doesn't it? Yeah.
I make no bones about it. I actually tell people, right off the bat, I am a misanthrope. And they said, well, how can you be a misanthrope? Because you go out and you write these books and you talk to people, you do lectures. I saw you on Discovery Channel a few years ago, blah, blah. How can you do this? I say, very easy. I have to move in this world. And the other thing is, now, I know this is leading into something else, but you basically have to take care of your circle where you are, the world, your little patch of the world. You can't take care of everybody. That's impossible. And even if you did, it's ludicrous because a lot of people don't deserve it. They have to be deserving of your compassion, of your empathy, of all this other stuff. But on the other hand, it's like you have to take care of the circle that you move in, the world that you move in. And part of that is, philosophically speaking, well, many people will disagree with me, and I've had debates about this, but really I still walk away. They still think they're a wine glass, but they're really a teacup, and I still walk away anyway. But the whole thing is this: everybody has a place in society. It's just a film that you're watching. You have the evil, terrible people, and you have the good, angelic people, and you have the people in between. And there has to be the hero, and there has to be the love interest, and all those other. Everybody has a position in this. It doesn't mean that they're higher or lower than someone. It just means that is their function in life. That's what makes things work. I'm not too sure which book I wrote this in, but I talk about limitations. And everybody has limitations. And you have to understand what those limitations are so that you don't put undeserved expectations on them that pushes them to the brink and they fail and you get all pissed off at them and make them apologize for them being them, which is total BS. My expectations of people generally is pretty low. I do things myself. If I can't do it myself, yeah, I will find someone who's qualified to do so. But I will not certainly put my expectations on someone that if I don't know what their limitations are. So this is the whole thing.
You oozed your way into my next question, but
I did.
I'm gonna put it on hold for a second.
Oh, okay.
Because I like to throw things at you that I didn't send you ahead of time because it keeps you on your toes. So I like what you said about taking care of your own circle, and your own circle being yourself, say, as the nexus, and those around you that deserve your love and attention. With regards to your own material, what level of awareness do you think that someone who reads your book needs to have? And I'm talking in terms of self-awareness and awareness of what is around them. Situational awareness, as we call it.
Yeah.
What level of awareness is required to take this information from you and apply it the way that you intend to have it applied?
I wrote it with the prerequisite in mind that, first of all, anybody who doesn't feel that they want to make any changes or they need to know knowledge, anyone who has shut themselves out and say, I know. I teach classes and I get students in there and say, I know. And I've actually called some out on it. I said, okay, so you know what? You're going to be special. You're going to go in that other room and I'm going to give you the test. And then if you pass it, I know you've known. And of course they fail. I'm playing to their ego. And when someone puts their ego out there, that's their destruction. That's self-inflicted injury. And that's fine. Let them sink or swim. So basically, someone who would want my book or someone who might be interested in reading my books, hopefully, not just because of me, they've realized that they're open to new ideas. You have to be open to new ideas. Otherwise, once again, I said, you're the teacup that thinks you're a wine glass. And then, anyway. So the whole thing is you have to be open to new ideas. You have to say, well, I want some change in my life. And maybe I'm doing something wrong. Usually what really bungs you up is the smallest little thing. So if I can even open someone's awareness up to make them aware of the smallest little thing, my job is done here. I'm not saying that you have to agree 100% with what I write. As a matter of fact, I hope you disagree with something, because this is what critical thinking is all about. And we need more critical thinkers in every country of the world, in every position in the world, no matter what you do, to make this thing work and get us out of this mess that we're still in. There's not enough critical thinkers, by all means. But this is what the book appeals to. Someone says, I'm a fatherless boy, man. And geez, I might be able to use that. And that's the open-mindedness. The people that walk by it, or maybe the people that say, they click on the link on the Amazon and they figure they're going to get something by reading the first 10 pages that they give you. On some Amazon sites, they give you like a 10-page preview. And then they feel they've read the whole bloody book. And I feel sad for them, but, what can you do? But if they feel that way, that's good. Maybe they did get what they needed. And that's fine. I'm not saying, they just took advantage of me. Nah, it's fine, So I think that people would certainly enjoy it if they're prone to it, but it's not for everybody.
No, exactly. Neither is mine. Again, neutral wisdom, cheap plug, but you take what you want from it and you leave the rest.
Right.
And I'm gonna now direct you back to that question you started to slide into a little earlier. You managed to sneak certain philosophies into your writing. And this kind of leads back to my awareness question because I'm aware of what you're doing when you're doing it. And I don't think you're being obvious about it on purpose. I think if you're aware enough to pull it out, you can see it for what it is. So something like Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, obvious stoicism.
Yes.
And you base a lot of your stuff on stoicism. And the thing I find fascinating about that is I have a friend in our organization who's very big on stoicism. And I thought, oh, well, that sounds really cool. I kind of like that idea. So I studied stoicism and I went, nah, this isn't for me whatsoever. So there's that. But the other thing that you said where you tried to slide into this was you said, I don't expect somebody else to meet my expectations. Solipsism 101. And you never use the word, you never use the S word,
Nope.
not once.
Nope.
You alluded to earlier, to paraphrase you, water finds its own level. We all have a role in society. Yeah, stratification of society, which is something that we believe in,
Yes.
right? Satanists believe in that. So, do you find that philosophies, no matter where you're pulling them from, are philosophies a really good basis for plain old common sense?
Yes, definitely. The verse side of that, if you're speaking to a Christian preacher, they say, no, the Bible is a good basis for common sense. That's an easy way out. But the reality is this. Some people think, oh, philosophy, oh, you sit around and say, oh, life is a cookie. All right, so what? To me, the concept or the aspect of applied philosophy, and that's very important. If you can't apply it in everyday life, right, practically, yes, it's good to blue sky things in your head and stuff, but there are people out there in everyday life that need these things. And whether we call it common sense or applied philosophy or whatever, or just street smarts. In a lot of cases, I tend to think it's street smarts, but we label it different things. The other aspect, you mentioned stoicism a few times, and the interesting thing is people don't realize there's only one side of stoicism in our modern day. Actually, even in the 1980s, there was people studying stoicism, but it wasn't as popular. Now, towards the 90s, 2000s, it's getting more popular. But the interesting thing is, and this is going to freak people out, the stoicism that is popular is a stoicism that does not recognize a god or deity. It's an atheistic stoicism. Well, yeah, we'll call it that, but really, it's you get where I'm coming from. Because there are actually books that have been written that are stoicism with God in there, with a deity in there. But yeah, you could see with God stoicism, it's in there. But the one that's being popularized for a lot of reasons, and there's all sorts of conspiracy theories of why that is being popularized. Just like there's a satanic panic thing back then, but now it's like, oh, stoicism. This is the one that's being popularized. Now, the interesting thing though is, to me, it's stoicism light. It's not stoicism heavy. In that we can take this, and I don't think it's a crime or a terrible thing to take anything from any philosophy. Even in my book, I cover areas of Buddhism and Confucianism in my book. I pull from there as well and see if they do not work very well with satanic applied philosophy or any other. They're complementary. And if anything, they're sort of like that yellow highlighter that you highlight your notes with and say, yeah, this is, this is it. So I think that's the whole thing about it. I like Stoicism. I probably would have been a Stoic. Well, I'm sort of partly a Stoic, I guess, in certain ways, because of its practicality. But there's some things that make you numb, which is I don't agree with. Like I preach a lot about not letting external things bother you. But we're talking about external things that personally get at you. But in the bigger picture of things, which I didn't elaborate in the Lessons for Fatherless Boys or in my afternoon book, is in the bigger situation is if you get enough people buying into the concept of stoicism, this idea is that do not bother yourself with things that are beyond your control. This is something that we'll say a corporation or a government could use against you to conquer and divide you as a people. So I'm not so naive, but there are certain aspects. So you have to be aware of these things. And this is it goes back to critical thought. Because when you think back, I mean, like even a few of the Stoics were actually imprisoned. So their Stoicism well, yeah, it was beyond my control, but hold on here. Could this have not been used as a lever to put you in the penalty box, to put the people in the penalty box? It's not a war crime, but it should be something more like a civilization crime.
I think you and I could probably have a really interesting debate on Stoicism, just in terms of where it sits in our personal radar. And because we're talking about Stoicism right now, you speak specifically about it. And we know that Stoicism says don't bother yourself with things that you can't control. Now, as a Satanist, I believe that I make things happen. It says, well, you can't control them. You just don't bother with them. Now, in the big picture, on a macro level, true. What you say rings very true. If I were to personalize it, I would say, well, as a Satanist, I create my environment. I create those things around me. You also speak about noblesse oblige, which I love, but that refers to helping those below you.
Yes.
So now, as Satanists, is that not a little antithetical to what we're talking about here?
No.
Like, you don't think so? Okay, this
No,
is why.
I'll tell you why. You believe in lesser magic? Of course you do.
100%.
All right, so do I. This is, to me, one of the greatest forms of lesser magic. Okay, so here, take for instance, say you run a business and that you have all your underlings under you. So in a way that you're sort of like the overlord, you're above them and they're below you. And maybe they need an extra 15 minutes for lunch break, but you want to work them. You say the labor department says you get 30 minutes and I don't have to pay, and that's it. So the whole thing is that noblesse oblige, because you're in a higher position and you could make that 15 minutes happen. But you say, but no, I'm saying this, I don't have to do that. No, here, let me explain this. If you don't make that happen, these people are not going to produce properly for you. They might even, if you were a president, they could revolt against you. So a bit of lesser magic, oh yeah, you're good, that's okay, I'll give you the extra 15 minutes. Now, in exchange, what you're going to get from them is you're going to get better productivity. And you're still a good guy. You still opened up that communication. So to me, noblesse oblige, in this context, if you really want to look at it, rip it out of the lessons book and actually look at it in life, noblesse oblige actually is using a form of lesser magic to placate those under you that create a problem. Because understand, there's one of you, but there could be hundreds of them. And the fact of the matter is, one person in their lifetime will know roughly about 396 people. I think it's 396 people, which means that if you doubt that, I always say go on your LinkedIn or Facebook and see who it recommends people you may know and say, geez, that's my grade 4 school teacher, or that was my... It's scary. That's the 6 degrees of separation thing going on there, but that's another book and not our book. So we'll just be okay. But the whole thing is, this is where the critical thinking and looking at the bigger picture comes in. And we could easily discount and say, no, that's just, so you're not running to be Mother Teresa. You're not just doing it out of the kindness of your heart. Yeah, I mean, there's a benefit to it. You're sort of like the Canadian government when it takes taxes from you. Right? Well, I'm going to get in trouble here. And they say, geez, I got a rebate or I got a tax credit. Dude, it's your own money. See? But we think, oh, yeah, vote this guy in. He cut the tax off this thing. He's giving you back your own money.
Well, the analogy that you use about being the boss and giving the 15 minutes, is that not really a modified version of bread and circuses? Really? Because it sounded like that when you put it out there like that. And I used to work for a factory that used to do that.
But it
right?
depends on how they do it. You could do it properly, you could do it improperly. There's always two ways of doing it, a right way and a wrong way. Usually people say there's a million ways of doing it the wrong way, and there's only one way of doing it the right way. I mean, we can apply this to other situations. Like take, for instance, okay, if there are people in your circle, forget about being the boss or anything, but everybody has their own position in life. If there are people in your circle, nowadays, most people, they don't even know who their neighbors are on either side or across the way. If you're in a community where you do at least know your neighbors, they say hello to you or something, okay. But for instance, if you heard that they fell on hard times, or maybe, someone broke their leg and they couldn't get out, or whatever, the whole thing is, it's okay. So they're in a lesser position than you are. This is where you can establish a lesser magic, if you will, relationship with them. It sounds weird, but you go over there and you give them your condolences or bring them a meat pie or whatever it is, only to find out they're vegan or who knows what. It's a thought that counts. You go over there and they say, you know what? That chap over there next door, he's a good guy. You're in a unique situation there because all the other people around the neighborhood are probably like, bad people. Some words come to mind, but anyway, bad people. But on the other hand, they said, "This you're a good guy," so they will make you party perhaps to some of the intel that they have. They will look out for you. And what did it cost you? A meat pie. But within your circle. I said, if it's a person 2 blocks away, you're not going to do it. They're not within your, but you see, once again, this is noblesse oblige. It's the same thing. The whole idea is if you have more than someone else, or if you're in a position to help someone. Now, I don't play up the aspect of the lesser magic where it's going to be to your benefit, but ultimately, if you sort of critically think it out, yeah, it's to my benefit. This is the way you have to look at it. I just find that it's a system that works. It doesn't matter what your motivation is. It's once again, lesser magic is a very superficial thing. They don't read into this or that or the other thing. But being Satanist, you're going to read into it. You're going to say, well, what is this? I even go so far as speaking, I think it's in the afternoon book, but I talk about a philanthropist, and I've known quite a few. They go and they give all this money. And people say, oh, yeah, they got their name on the hospital wing, or they got their name on the library. And I got my name in the Warplane Heritage Museum, and who cares? People just don't do this. Now, you could say, oh, it's a noblesse oblige thing. Yeah, I can afford to do it. But the reason people do it is because it might not be for fortune and fame, but deep inside, maybe there's something else. There's a reason for it. There always is. Don't tell me philanthropists do it for no reason. Or even anonymous donors don't do it. There's a reason why they do this. But people would have you believe there isn't an ulterior motive. And I'm not knocking the people that give these things away because that's good. Because if it fulfills them in whatever capacity, that's great. They don't have to have their name on the building. So it's the same thing. It's in this case might be lesser magic to help them make them feel better, make them come over a personal insecurity or something of that effect, make them feel more useful in society. So I look at it this way. So it doesn't hurt, but I'm not saying be like the martyr of all neighborhooddom, but only within your circle. You can only touch the lives of people in your circle. Now, notwithstanding, one of the things that I did, and I usually don't talk about what I do, but I went and with regards to the situation in a particular war zone, a certain superpower withheld funding and things to them and medical aid and stuff for a period of time. When I heard this, and I think this is basically because I had been in similar situations where things had been withheld in terrible parts of the world, not tourist places, I immediately sent some money to what I validated as a reliable source. So why am I doing this? It's a lesser magic thing more for me in a weird sort of way, because I could relate to that. Maybe it's a scar still within me that I'm trying to heal over. But at the same time, the people that they could have bailed like a bunch of rats, as so many people do from different countries, and end up on somebody else's shore in a boat or at immigration and say asylum seeker. Instead, they stood and fought. And for that alone, that honor rips me apart inside from what I've seen and what I personally experienced. That moves me. So I have to do something about that. That action has to put a reaction in me. But once again, it's a noblesse oblige thing, because if I couldn't afford to do it, I wouldn't have done it. Right?
Well, I am humbled and consider me educated. And why didn't you write it this way in the damn book? Because that I got.
Well, no, but you see, it's lessons for fathers, boys, and men. Fathers, boys, and men don't really. If I put lessons for satanic fatherless boys and men, it'd be different.
I'd have bought it a lot sooner then.
Oh, there you go. But instead, you see, but I have to deal with it as a neutral thing, as the surface. But everything I write, and I've had some people actually looked at the things I've written and they've torn it apart and said, yeah, but this is just like you have to a degree, but some will go further. I'll say, this is this. And yeah, I got it. Actually, I've gotten messages, emails and things from people. I get about 150 emails a day. So it takes me a while to get back to people. But I get people say, yeah, I finally picked up that book, or I finally read, or I watched that thing that you said on such and such, and I finally got it. I know what you were talking about. But superficially, there's things there for people too. So, I mean, it's good. It's
I only took away from it the superficial.
no, no, that's
And
fine though.
so, but asking the proverbial horse makes all the difference in the world.
And
And
I
that's
didn't
why
make a horse's ass out of myself.
well, that's my job. But but that's why I put in there. That's a personal question for me because I'm
Yeah,
looking at all of it going, this doesn't really make sense. But it's subjective. And I think it's subjective to how you look at it and
yeah,
the filters that you put on it that
yes,
are going to influence how you receive the information, just like everything I do. I think just like everything you do. And that's the takeaway for me personally. I don't disagree with noblesse oblige. I did,
yeah,
but when you framed it in a context that made sense to me, okay, now
yeah,
I get what you're going for.
yeah,
And this goes back to the awareness thing. I don't
yes,
know what I don't know, so this is a good jumping off point for those people that
exactly.
don't know
I
what
mean,
they don't know.
they're stuck in the jar.
We're getting there.
I didn't
Don't
say anything. I just
don't
said,
you go don't you go whipping out the pickle just yet. We're getting to that one.
oh, that's it. You're going to get a different rating on this.
I think so. I think so. So just to go back to that one more time,
Yes.
it's the philosophy thing. Do you think it would matter to somebody if they found out that the book that they read, the book that they love, the book that they apply now was written by a Satanist? There's satanic philosophy in it. Now, understanding that basically everything in there is human nature. You didn't make any amazing discoveries or
Oh,
uncover a new facet of human behavior, but we observe all of this. Now, herd conditioning says that's bad, right? So, how would you explain to somebody where your advice comes from to somebody who says, well, that's bad advice because it's Satanism. Why should I listen to this?
well, I would say I wouldn't argue with them. I say if you would rather tune it out, that's good for you. By the way, did you buy the book? Don't return it. Uh, but on the other hand, it's like this. I really throughout my career, right? Really, especially since 2006, being a member, since 2006, I haven't really hidden the fact that I am. I mean, that I am a Satanist, but I'm very subtle about it. I don't put in people's faces and everything else. People would figure that out eventually, or they do some Google stuff and they'll see that I appeared on Satanic podcasts. They'll see that I had a book that came out called The Millionaire Satanist, which is out of print. I get tons of people asking about that. And actually, interestingly enough, some of the excerpts from there ended up in the afternoon with me and ended up in lessons to a degree. So I've excerpted in certain things. It's a combination of all sorts of different philosophies, things that work. And I mean, LeVay really spoke about human nature, the carnal beast, on all sorts of levels. And it's there. He simply codified what Satanism is. He codified it. He actually drew say, well, this is what Satanism is because we pull from here. But a lot of these things, a lot of these philosophies, a lot of these observations were out there before. I'm not dissing him, by the way. I'm just saying a lot of this stuff is out. You can only reinvent the wheel so many times, but it's still a wheel. So what he's done is he's codified it. He has put guardrails on it to a degree, and that's a good thing because people can't understand, or they'll literally blow their mind if they could get everything that's in there and put it in between their ears.
We piecemeal it. We take from it what we want to take from it. And does it matter where it comes from if it rings true for you?
Not at all. Not at
Right.
all. I mean, but once again, it's all got to do perception. And people are taught from cradle to grave, a lot of people, the assembled multitude, as I call them, that you need a benefactor, that you're evil, and all this other stuff. And that's where the problem is, isn't it? I mean, our perception grid is already there.
Well, it's time. Dr. Robert Ing, let's talk about your pickle.
Oh,
My favorite essay in the whole book is Lessons from the Pickle Jar. I
wow.
love that. I love the analogy. I love the visual, and it really is very clear as to what you're talking about in there. It's accurate to the limited scope that we have as people in society, which I think is fantastic. So, for those of us who have not yet read the book, and now you have no excuse, you have to go out and buy it. But I want to hear lessons from the pickle jar from the big pickle himself.
Oh, geez. Okay. If you got the Millionaire Satanist, you actually have a whole chapter on the pickle. But nonetheless, so basically, I always say to myself, or I will say to people, look, so picture a pickle jar where there's a lone pickle in it on your shelf. Can you imagine what it'd be like to be that pickle? All by yourself, floating in that pickle fluid. It's nice to be pickled, but floating in that pickle fluid, it's just the right temperature. It's very, very comfortable. It's your environment. Just like being in your environment, the pickle, it's neutral. It's not good, it's not bad. And as a result, a lot of times it protects the pickle, but the pickle, they don't think about it. Just like and I always say, well, like, say your toothbrush or your cozy blanket or the light above your head, you often don't think about them. You use them, but you just don't think about it. But you appreciate they're there. They're in your situation. So you're very comfortable there. Just think about you being with pickle there. So you're looking out at the world through this glass jar. Your vision is limited by the jar. I'm not saying it's a dirty jar. I'm just saying that you can only see so far. And then, my goodness, there's a label on there. You see a label, so you can't quite see past the label. In a lot of ways, you will find that this is basically your perception of the world. This is how you see things. As the pickle, when you look out, it's shaped by what you see. In certain ways, confirmation bias. You're expecting to see certain things, and that's all you see, and you accept that. Not realizing maybe there's a world beyond the jar, but you're comfortable in that. That's a good thing. Here's the other thing with regards to being a pickle. You got a label, and the label is put on there by some guy who's probably making minimum wage. He pulls some levers and it slaps a label on the front of the pickle jar. And on that label, it labels you. It tells what type of pickle it is, best before date. Or you can talk about maybe ageism there. There's all sorts of other things you talk about there. And it actually will determine on that label, whether the pickle goes on what shelf in the supermarket. So it could be like top shelf, number one, or it could be the 54 shelf, where, they put the roach sprays and stuff down there too. So this is the problem. But the pickle doesn't know, because the pickle can't read. Well, we know pickles can't read. Okay, so the pickle can't even see that side. For all its life, all it sees is what it can see through this little glass jar, and can't see beyond it. Doesn't know what's on the label. But what happens is the pickle itself is there. And just like the pickle, we humans get labeled by societal norms. The guy who's operating the switches, putting the pickle on the jar, he's just following orders. He's just following a system. He doesn't think about it. He doesn't question it. But he knows to label it. We, as individuals, in our pickle jar, within our perception of the world, limited as it is, get this label put on us. Now, this label is put on us by these societal norms, and people don't think about it. They'll look at you and they'll figure, like, you're smart or you're stupid, your religion, your culture, whether they like you, whether they don't like you, and all this craziness based on this label they put on you. But like the pickle, you have no idea how they see you. You have no idea what label they put on you. But then you find that, you're in this jar as a pickle, and for whatever reason, they put you on the third shelf, not the first, not the 54th, thank goodness. But they put you into this third shelf. So this is your place in society because of how you look. Whether they figure you look stupid or smart and all this other stuff. You figure you're stuck there because what you could do is you could sit there and say, well, I guess this is what I am, and accept it. The other thing is, if you stay too much in that fluid, that pickling fluid, you understand if you've had pickles for a while, eventually the fluid gets murky and you can't see as far and you start to stagnate, but you're happy in your isolation, in your ignorance. So what happens is, well, say someone takes that pickle though, and they bite into it, and it says that you're extra mild on the label, but they bite into it, and whammo, you're extra spicy, and they spit it out, and they go crazy, and they say, this is crazy, I'm suing the company. But what happened is you see, the mislabeling of the pickle and the mislabeling of you, in a way, is to your advantage. If you keep mum about it, you keep silent about it, you could use it in a form of lesser magic, going into the lesser magic thing again, to your advantage. When people don't know certain things about you, they could be your superpowers, they could be your secret weapon. And just like the pickle, wham, right between the eyes, metaphor, the pickle could break out of this jar. Maybe the person drops the jar and drops the pickle on the floor. In true Disney fashion, the pickle stands up and starts looking around and seeing there's a whole world out there. Here's the thing. This is the whole concept, right, of the pickle. The jar is your perception, how you see the world. It's what you're born into. The lies we've been carrying when we were young, Oh, you got your whole life ahead of you. All this other stuff, which is not true. You can do anything you want to be. You can be anything you want to be. No, not true. Sorry. But you can do whatever the opportunities are in front of you, but you gotta be able to spot the opportunities. That jar and your perception is what's holding you back. But then what's even more so is you're so comfortable in that fluid, comfortable in your perception, in your little environment. You don't want to take a risk. You have fear. You're afraid to go out and take a risk. You don't get anywhere in this world, and it sounds cliche, unless you go through a painful experience. And I'm not saying go out and look for trouble, right? There's no pain, no gain business, they say in all the gyms, but there's a lot of torn muscles and stuff because of that. But you have to understand that a comfortable life is a life not lived. If you live a life of comfort, you have not really lived because you haven't been pushed to the limit. You're sort of actually numb, really. You're living a life that's very numb and unfulfilling. Like, as a matter of fact, you might feel that, oh, this is boring. I don't do anything. I don't go anywhere. So who's stopping you? Be like the pickle. Get out of the jar and go out and see the world. Meet a jalapeno on the side or something.
We need to collaborate on a line of merch for this entire theory. But it sounds an awful lot to me like the label on the pickle jar would read Alfred Adler's Pickle Company.
Quite possibly.
It sounds very, very familiar to a certain philosopher in a certain way. Like I was getting a lot of Adlerian reference out of especially the floating in the fluid part. And, it really kind of zapped into focus there. I'm like, oh, this is Adler. Like it pulls Adler into it.
The embryonic fluid, but we can go deeper into this. We won't go there. But the interesting thing is I'm working on something else. I'm right here. I have pickled carrots. So I have a thing about carrots and pickles, but that's something else. That's for later on. You'll read about it. I actually do a bit of a demonstration with pickles in a jar or carrots in a jar. And it has a sort of a magician of the mind twist to it as well.
Well, you brought that up, so that kind of leads me to the last thing that I have for you. And where can we find you? I would love to see you perform live, this magician of the mind and the metaphysical stuff that you do, but also where can we find you? You've mentioned many times you've been on television. You're published in certain periodicals. Where do we find Robert Ing?
Well, right now, for the past couple of years, post-COVID, I've done a lot of video stuff, but I do have Magic of the Mind videos of things that people can do at home over the internet. It's up on YouTube. Dr. Robert Ing, the Paranormalist. I will post links to them on my Facebook page if people go there. There are 2 pages. Dr. Robert Ing Facebook page, but there's also one that says Robert Ing, and you'll see me in a flight suit in front of a CF-101 Voodoo interceptor bomber. It's the profile picture. And I'll make them public so you can see them there. I did those about 5 or 6 years ago. And I did that because a lot of people said, well, can you do stuff at distance and stuff? And some of you might say, that's just craziness, but some of it's kind of interesting. It's the magician of the mind stuff that I do. But yeah, so if you could Google Dr. Robert Ing, magician of the mind or something, and you'd see it there maybe on YouTube. You see all sorts of stuff that I should take down too. Anyway.
And do you have a website as well?
Sadly, I don't. Missed opportunity. I do have a web address that I use, which is drdroberting.co.uk. Dr. Robert Ing altogether, and then .co.uk. And that actually directs you to the books that I have currently available on Amazon. But yeah, so basically that's it. So how do you get a hold of me? There's different ways. I have quite a following on Instagram. I'm not boasting. I'm just saying there's a lot of people on Instagram, and you do a lot of Instagram messaging with me if you're on Instagram. And I'm at Dr._Robert_ING on Instagram. Now, don't expect me to get back to you really quickly because I have like tens of thousands of followers on there, and I get messages a lot there. But nonetheless, once I get it, you get my priority. If you do friend me and you don't see me friending you back, which I'd like to do reciprocally, especially if people find me through these channels, please don't be shy. Send me a note and say, hey, I friended you. Could you, or I taught you, I friended you, that kind of thing. Another thing is Facebook. On Facebook, Dr. Robert Ing on Facebook. You'll see me. You'll see my mug on there. Or I also my personal page. You'll see me standing by the jet plane, just under Robert Ing. That's how you get in touch with me. Facebook message me or Instagram message me. I usually don't give my email out just publicly, but once you message me and you have something you want me to do, you will get my email, and we can converse that way. Just so you know, too, a lot of my stuff is curated as well. So that means that someone does check my emails and check my, so, don't send me weird stuff. I mean, and I'm not saying, I'm saying weird, like,
I've got to go recall a bunch of messages I sent earlier.
my curator's been instructed. Even though I'm into forensics, I don't want to see pictures of anatomy. I'll just leave it at that.
That makes sense. Yeah, well, we finish our summer yard project this year. I'll send you deck pics. How's that?
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Unsolicited deck pics. There you go. Well, I've had a real blast with this, and thank you so much for coming here and doing this today. I very much appreciate it. You got to unpack a lot of stuff for me, and I am definitely going to harass you to have you back at some point when you can clear up your schedule between the work, the books, that kind of stuff. If you can squeeze us back in here, that would be fantastic.
That'd be great.
Thank you again so much, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for joining me, and thank you for having me and the whole thing. Thank you.
All right, we'll see you soon.
Cheers.
And that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. I'd like to thank all of you for listening, and a huge thank you to our guests and all of you for joining us today. Please drop a like or comment down below. For questions or comments, you can email me directly at information@neutralwisdom.ca. You can listen to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. A like and subscribe go a long way in getting this podcast out there. Check me out on Facebook under Robert Shirley, and check out Instagram at neutral_wisdom. And be sure to visit the website at neutralwisdom.ca. And don't forget, Neutral Wisdom, Contemplations of a Satanic Warlock, now available at Amazon in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle formats. Until next time, ever forward.
You have been listening to the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. For more information, email us at information.neutralwisdom.ca, Facebook under Robert Shirley, or Instagram at neutral_wisdom. Also check out our website at neutralwisdom.ca. Program copyrighted 2025. Devilish Gentleman Enterprises.